ESBR Boxing. Delighted to be joined by Danny. We are here to discuss Anthony Joshua's next fight. As it's been confirmed, he will return in April against a top 15 opponent before potentially fighting Dillian Whyte in their rematch in the summer. Danny, thank you for joining me. How are you? You excited ahead of the start of the year?
Yeah, all good, mate. Thanks very much. Yeah, buzzing to be honest. I know sort of good the sort of reset for Christmas and the New Year, but personally I'm itching for the boxing to get back, and particularly sort of bigger UK fights, and obviously it's still none as big or bigger than Anthony Joshua. So yeah, looking forward to discussing this with you.
Yeah, I feel like with Joshua, it's an interesting time in his career because we are used to him being kind of this big star who fights in football stadiums, and that's not going to be the case for his next fight. It is going to be a step down. However, still going to be pay-per-view, still going to be kind of a very big name in the sport. So yeah, interested to see what's going to happen. There are, on paper, you'd think there were plenty of options. We expect it to be announced in the next couple of weeks who this fight's going to be against in April. First question I've got then is, how much of a test do you think it should be for Joshua? Because I feel like the way I see it is he cannot lose this fight. If he loses, it's very difficult for him to be sold as for him to kind of sell the next fight. But at the same time, I think he's too far into his career to go up against someone who's just going to kind of fall over the first time they get hit. So what sort of opponent do you think we're going to see? We've been told top 15. It's debatable what top 15 is, what rankings you look at, but interested to get your thoughts on what Joshua should do.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Eliot in the past has been quite liberal with his use of top 10 and top 15. I know Derek Chisora has been a fringe top 5 heavyweight for a while, so I think you can take the sort of top 15 comment with a pinch of salt. But as you say, Joshua has to win this fight and has to look good doing it, really. Sort of the quotes that I heard was saying that it would be a top 15, and then Dillian Whyte. I think even the fact you're having a tune-up fight for Dillian Whyte at this stage sort of says a lot about the sort of confidence they maybe have in Joshua. There's been a few names that have been banded around a lot. I think the one you've sort of seen most frequently is Otto Wallin. Obviously fought Tyson Fury. Wouldn't be opposed to a fight like that. Then you've got, as you said, on paper there are loads of options where they're sort of recognisable names, but you would make Joshua a sort of considerable favourite, even though sort of the perception is he's maybe, not in the form he was during his prime. So there's Zhilei Zhang. You've also got Jermaine Franklin, who gave a good account of himself against Whyte. Now got a decent sort of profile in UK shores. And I mean, aside from that, you're maybe looking at like Filip Hrgovic. Don't know how likely that is given his position now with the IBF, but I think it'll be probably one of those three names that I just mentioned there initially, sort of Jermaine Franklin, Otto Wallin, or Zhilei Zhang, somewhere around that sort of level.
Yeah, I think it's going to be someone who, I'm not going to say hardcore, but mediocre, between casual and hardcore fans have heard of. It's not going to be someone we've never heard of, but it's not going to be a massive name. He's not going to be fighting Joe Joyce or Deontay Wilder in April. I think we know that for sure. We'll go through those three names. Otto Wallin, who gave Tyson Fury a very difficult fight a couple of years ago. Southpaw, a big heavyweight, not quite as big as Joshua. Has only lost that one fight to Fury. Got a good record of 24-1. I agree with you. I think that fight's been mentioned a lot. What are your thoughts on that fight for Joshua? How much of a test is that for him? Is that the correct fight for him to be taking at this point?
I think that would be, if that is the route they go down, that would probably be a step up from what I was expecting in terms of fight difficulty. Don't get me wrong, Joshua would go in a big favourite, but I mean, you look at, I know, comparing Otto Wallin and U6, a sort of dangerous game, but he is a southpaw. He is more of a mover than a plotter, you would say. And he did give Tyson Fury, plenty to think about when they fought. Must have been 2-3 years ago now. As you said, a sort of somewhat recognisable name on UK shores, and sort of given where Joshua is, and the fact Wallin won't just be there to get knocked out in front of him for the first 3 or 4 rounds. It could prove to be a tricky night for Joshua, although Wallin's not really a puncher. It's probably not the most dangerous fight in the world. But if you're looking for someone that Joshua can go in there and make a statement and people can start saying, oh, the old AJ's back, this and that, then I'm not sure from that perspective he would be the opponent I would choose. But as a fan who wants to see the most competitive fights possible, I think he would probably be that of the realistic names that, are in consideration for the fight.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another kind of point I'd make is that it's a sellable fight because Wallin has a good record and that loss is to Fury. So if Joshua can go out there and stop Wallin, which he could do, then that's a good way of kind of building him back up for future fights. So yeah, it's definitely a possibility. Move on to the second name now. Zhilei Zhang, did you mention? Yeah, Zhilei Zhang, who I'm a fan of personally. I know he's not the quickest, but I think that I personally thought he beat Hrgovic on the Usyk Joshua 2 undercard. He's a big guy, can punch a bit. He's a big name in the sense that he's a heavyweight from China, and China's not overflowing with heavyweight boxers. So I wouldn't mind this actually. I think this would be another fun fight. Yeah, looking forward to hearing your thoughts on it as well.
I think if I was Eddie Hearn, this would probably be the name I would go for. Zhang's profile a lot bigger from fighting on the Joshua Usyk undercard. I think the majority of people sort of shared the view you said there that he probably got the better of Hrgovic that night. And the fact that he's a Chinese heavyweight, I know it seems likely that Josh is going to fight in the UK, but if they were to do it, say at the Bird's Nest in China, that would still be huge. And in terms of Josh's international profile, I mean, I can't think of the heavyweight who's boxed in China before. Maybe it's just before my time. But and again, it's more of a style that Zhang can punch a bit, so there's potentially more of a danger there for the first 2 or 3 rounds. But you would still fancy Joshua to go in there and knock him out if he's anything like what he was 3 or 4 years ago. And I think you're more likely to get that sort of early highlight reel finish that'll get people talking about Joshua again. And Zhang, that no one's ever done that to Zhang before. And he's 37, 38 now. So you'd imagine, I know he's not had a long career, but you'd imagine the punch resistance isn't brilliant. So I think if I was Eddie Hearn, that would be who I would be looking to get over.
I think also another big thing about Zhang is he's clearly not got the best stamina. I think if you remember the Jerry Forrest fight when he was kind of out on his feet for the last 4 or 5 rounds, the Hrgovic fight looked pretty exhausted in the second half of the fight. So you've got to think that I would really fancy Joshua to stop him rounds 5 to 8. Personally, I think Zhang would be a threat in the early on, to be honest. I think Zhang's game plan could be to try and stop Joshua early. But that's kind of, in my opinion, that's how you beat Zhang. You kind of get the second half of the fight and he's not going to be the same fighter. I also think Zhang, you mentioned his age there. He's not in a position to turn down a fight with Joshua. Zhang could possibly only have 2-3 fights left, whatever happens in his career. So, yeah, genuine possibility. Zhang obviously last fought August, September time, whenever that rematch was, the Usyk Joshua rematch. So you'd think he'd be ready for a fight in April. So, yeah. Another possibility. Final name, we're going to switch our attention to the guy who beat Zhang back last year, Filip Hrgovic. What are your thoughts on that one, Danny?
Yeah, it's crazy how the sort of perception of Hrgovic has changed just as a result of that one fight with Zhang, which, as we've already said, we thought he probably lost. It wasn't a robbery, it wasn't. He didn't lose that convincingly, but that was the general consensus. But before that, he was seen as like this boogeyman and potential heir to the heavyweight throne. And you hesitate to write a fighter completely off after one loss. He didn't look as if his head was in it that night. The body language, he kept turning away and looked as if he was like one more clean shot away from giving up. So it was strange. Again, he's mandatory now for the IBF, isn't he? But how likely is that to materialise soon for him? If we're going to get this undisputed fight, and I believe the WBA is the next mandatory to be called. So, if they, in terms of a payday in the next year, you would say he's not going to get anything like a fight with Anthony Joshua. And again, it would be a dangerous fight for Joshua because Hrgovic could still be this boogeyman, this elite heavyweight that a lot of people thought he was prior to the Zhang fight. But based on that night and the sort of athletic advantages Joshua would have over Zhang, you would fancy Joshua again in that fight, but not a foregone conclusion, especially where Joshua is sort of mentally at the minute.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is a strange one with Hrgovic. A lot of people thought he was the next big thing and a threat to anyone with kind of a belt in the heavyweight division. It feels like things have been a bit quiet since his last fight. I know he kind of got announced as mandatory for the IBF, but just from what I've heard, you're not hearing rumors about who he's going to fight next, when he's going to be fighting. I feel like if I was kind of advising Hrgovic, don't fight Joshua next and don't fight Usyk next either. I think he's clearly got some way to go before he kind of is ready to step up. He's still only 30, which isn't old for a heavyweight. He's only had 15 fights, which is impressive to be in the position he's in after that many fights. So out of the names we've mentioned, I personally think Hrgovic is the least likely. That's just my opinion. But if it did happen, would interest me. I think it would be a good fight. Again, it's a fight that people are aware of, and obviously, unlike Zhang, he won his last fight, so that might kind of get more people interested. A name we'll can just touch on quickly, Jermaine Franklin. I do think this is a genuine possibility. Jermaine Franklin had a very close fight against Dillian Whyte a couple of months ago. My only point on the Franklin fight would be if Joshua knocks him out in a couple of rounds, which I think could happen. It's then hard to sell Joshua Whyte to, considering Whyte arguably lost to him. But yeah, I'll quickly get your thoughts on that one as well, Danny.
Yeah, that's literally the point I was going to make on a potential Joshua fight with Franklin. I thought he just edged the fight with Dillian Whyte personally. Again, not buying off to say robbery or anything like that. And by the end of the fight, even though I thought he had edged it, I knew what way the scorecards were going to read. But see, to be honest, in terms of selling a fight between Joshua and Whyte, I don't have much interest in it. I think even at the respective stages in their career, I would make Joshua a very heavy favourite against the current version, Dillian Whyte. And this might sound controversial. I think Otto Wallin would give Joshua more problems than Dillian Whyte at the current stage of this career. So the fact that Wallin's been potentially touted as a tune-up before Dillian Whyte, I think it's more they're trying to get a payday for AJ before another one with Dillian Whyte, and then potentially a bigger one towards the end of the year. But I think Franklin would pose probably Joshua similar issues he did Whyte, but just not for as long, because I think Joshua would probably stop him, as you say, in the first 7-8 rounds.
Yeah. Without going down a rabbit hole too much, Joshua Whyte too doesn't do a lot for me. I don't understand why Joshua can't fight Whyte in April and then look to fight. I wouldn't mind him fighting Whyte in April and then fighting Wallin or Hrgovic in the summer, someone who's on that same level as Whyte, another top 15 heavyweight. I would rather that personally, because if you look at Whyte's last handful of fights, didn't win a round against Fury, got knocked out by Povetkin, arguably lost against Franklin, beat a 41-year-old Povetkin. It's not
the middle with COVID there. Povetkin should have been nowhere near a boxing ring. Nowhere near.
Exactly. So we'll stop talking about that now, but I just think that fight doesn't excite me, if I'm being honest. I'll watch it, we'll all watch it, but it doesn't excite me. Final question from me, Danny. Out of those 4 names that we've mentioned, what is the one? What do you think? 2 questions. What do you think is most likely? And if you were to pick who Joshua was going to face next out of those 4, who would it be?
Otto Wallin's been the name that's sort of been most mentioned for the longest amount of time. So I think that's probably the most likely. If I was picking for AJ, I would pick Zhang. I think he's the most easy to look good against. He's got a style that flatter Joshua the most. But I think it probably will be Wallin if a bullet was put to my head.
Yeah. We shall see. Scheduled to fight in April. Hopefully that means it gets announced in the next month or so. But yeah, we'll see. Plenty more questions to ask, and we'll be reacting to whenever that announcement comes around of who Joshua is fighting. Danny, thank you for your time as always. Yeah, looking forward to seeing what happens next in the career of Anthony Joshua. But yeah, thank you very much for your time.
No problem, mate. Cheers.